Carra Aschenmeier is the lead teacher of assessment and mentorship at Grande Yellowhead Public School Division. She began her position there in the fall of 2016. She has 22 years experience at the junior high and high school levels. She's been an assistant principal and a principal at the largest high school there. She'll graduate with her MED in educational research from University of Calgary soon, very soon, yeah. She's a firm believer that student voice creates the ideal collaboration within the data decision-making process. Student engagement and participation in creating change are essential aspects in schools improvement. So in Grande Yellowhead, data-driven decision-making and collaboration go hand in hand. They believe that engagement of students and all stakeholders empowers positive improvement for schools. So today we'll find out how student voice is used within Grande Yellowhead and how students are analyzing their own Our School data to isolate areas of need and identify possible solutions known as game changers.
So thank you, Doug, for your sharing of what is happening in your district with students. A little bit in terms of my experience, I started new in the position in September 2016, but I've been with Grande Yellowhead my entire career. So next year will be year 23, and I've had the pleasure of connecting with our students as a teacher, as a lead teacher, as an assistant principal, and as a principal. So for me to share with you a little bit about the Our School data and our process makes me very proud. This year, Grande Yellowhead really worked on a health and wellness directive. And we have a new mental health action plan that was put into place last year, and it was initiated this year. And through that mental health action plan, we had, of course, looked at Our School data last year. We had students at the junior high levels engaged in Our School data. And I'll just move ahead here. So in sort of prefacing where we're at in our journey this year, I wanted to share that it really is a collaboration. So I'm really going to focus on the importance of not just our student voice, but our student engagement, as Doug shared the importance of student engagement. But being a passionate person with assessment, I kind of wanted to share my target for my small presentation, that I do want to share with you a little bit about the division analysis that's done with the Our School data. I want to talk very briefly about the analysis with our principals, but I really want to talk, and a little bit about staff, but I really want to talk about what our students have done and where we're at. So this year, we have tried something new in terms of our collaboration. So in terms of our current results, they were shared with our Board of Trustees, and this year we shared trend data. So this is the third year that all of our schools, grades 4 to 9, completed the Our School survey. So we haven't done it quite as long as other districts have, St. Albert Public as an example from the last presentation, but it's been a 3-year term. So this was the first time that we were able to present our successes and our challenges with our Board of Trustees. And this was really valuable because it provided the data to our trustees, and it has shown them where we have made differences for our students, but also shows the areas that still require focus or new strategies for improvement. This morning, someone made reference to, and I apologize for not remembering their name, talked about, I think it was Joanne, talked about, you know, how you can use data as a stick or how you can really get hung up on certain parts of the data. This was a very valuable way to show the successes and challenges to our Board of Trustees, because year in and year out, they want to talk about the depression and the anxiety. And we don't want to make that not important. It certainly is, but we wanted them to see that there are successes happening as well. And so sharing with them the trend data that was done, and I was a part of doing the trend data over 3 years, was very, very important. And we divided that into our elementary schools and also into our secondary. So that was one of the ways that we shared with our district. This year with our principals and my new role as assessment and mentorship, we also had 5 new district principals. So having 5 new principals is an opportunity to have new culture created. And so when we were looking at discussing data and our evidence-based decision making, we knew we had 5 new principals who had never done it before. Now they may have been possibly assistant principals previously, maybe they came from other districts, and so we really acknowledged that we needed to model a process for them. So I really appreciated Joanne's sharing what they do at their district, and I'm hoping I'll be able to email Joanne and she might be willing to share, because we started at a very basic level with our new principals. So what this meant is that our district leadership team meeting, our principals were given with a framework on the Our School data analysis. And we did this with other data pieces as well. So we did this with PATS and DIPS, and we also used a survey tool called Thought Exchange. But with our principals, they had never really been walked through and modeled how to look at the data. What does the data mean? What are the guiding principles? So I shared with them how to dig into the data, and they were able to, during our district leadership team meeting, have their laptops open, have their Our School data open, and they were working on looking at their data and asking questions, and how can I compare? And so then what I would do in a room like this is I would pull up the Our School data. I would show them from the district standpoint. This is what you're seeing. Here's how you can find a replica school. Here's how you can compare the years. And I know the Learning Bar really has significant resources for principals to do that, but we found with 5 new principals and the juggling of many things for them to do that we needed to model it. So our principals went through a very intensive guided analysis at the district level. And then our principals went into data analysis with their staffs. And I want to share the story of one of our middle schools, grades 6, 7, and 8. And the principal there said to me, Carra, can you come to my school? I want to do a little test run before I have my PLC for the next, I have a plan what I want to do for 4 weeks. I said, okay, what's your plan? Well, come to the school and let's log in and see how many logins to Our School can we do. And I said, okay, so what are you doing? And he said, I really want to engage my staff in what you did with us at the district leadership team meeting. So at a series of 3 PLCs for the first 2, he had his staff divided into groups of 5. They sat with the computer. They got to explore the different domains. They got to look at comparing years. And they were engaged for 2 PLCs just looking. There was no guidance from the principal. There was look at your data, look at your school. All he said was, I want you to look for things that jump out at you. I want you to write down any questions you have. On their 3rd PLC, their school staff came together and talked about what they saw as successes, what they saw as challenges, and where they wanted to dig deeper. So they had a school staff of experts really truly looking at their data. It wasn't confrontational, it wasn't being used to evaluate his staff, it was really engaging them in understanding where their students were at. And that was incredibly valuable, and I know that one of our elementary principals has done a little bit of a similar process. That was not mandated. We are site-based management as well, and I think it was a really good model for principals to do with their staff. And based upon what we had done with student voice last year in Grand Yellowhead, we had, in our last year, we had a youth district symposium. And it was our grade 7 and 8 students last year. And what they did was they looked at the Our School data. So they had table facilitators, they had an explanation of the data provided, and they got to understand what the survey really meant and see their data. But what we hadn't realized didn't occur, and what really needs to occur is that they need to be involved in the action. It's not important that they understand where they are at as a school. And the conversations were very rich, where kids were saying, we don't know about that data. We're not sure that that's really a reflection of our school. And so there was lots of discussions about discrepancies in data. And those were things driven by the students. But at the beginning of this school year, we acknowledged very quickly that it was really well and fine for students to read and see their own student voice, but they needed to be involved in the process for change. And so this year, we changed our model a little bit, and at the end of next year, I guess we'll have a better idea of how successful it was, or ways we maybe want to tweak it. But we targeted this year, for the first time, our high school students, and we created what was called a mini symposium. So at the mini symposiums, we had our health champion for each school site. So we have health and wellness champions in each of our school settings. And so we had our health champions choose 25 to 30 students, and not the high flyers, in fact, it was pretty interesting. They wanted a cross range, we did, of students. We had our First Nation Métis Inuit family school liaison worker in one of our high schools actually engage some of our First Nation Métis Inuit students who didn't come to school. So we had a wide range of students who were talked about and said, would you please come? We really want your voice. We want to talk about what you're saying. We want you to be a part of a change. So they were modeled through a process, and I think it's important, and Joanna said this too, and so did the gentleman on the live stream there that was brought in for us, is that it's really important how you share the data. And we acknowledge that in the mini symposiums, it would be important that we explain what they're looking at. So we know, and science teachers in the room know, that we always teach kids about titles and X and Y axis, but we really need to dig deeper and make them understand what the data is and what it's saying. So at the mini symposiums, we walked our students through the data in a very different way. So I'm going to share with you a couple of the ways that we did this, and this is an example of one of our high schools, the youth symposium. So I'm going to kind of simulate the process with you. So we are new to Google. I know most of you are going, you poor thing. All of our schools are not on Google yet. As of the end of May, we will have officially made the transfer to Google. So this was also a really great learning tool for us as educators, and our ed lead technology teacher was present as well. So we did use Google and Google Forms as one of our formats for doing this. So students were sitting at a table. There were tables of 5 or 6 students. Every table had a facilitator. The facilitator was either their health and wellness champion, which is a teacher on their site, myself. We had success coaches. We had some of our family school liaison counselors there. We had table facilitators. And so they began by using the Google Forms, and the facilitators would click on, and in this case, they would click on the introduction. At the introduction, what happened was students were asked to share what they thought, initially, without looking at the data in depth, what was going well in their school, and what they thought were areas of concern. And it was a free-flow conversation. So the table facilitators would prompt with questions, but we really worked hard in trying to encourage them not to plant any ideas or ask any leading questions. And we asked them to record every single thing that the kids at the table said. So they were asked what's going well, what's areas of concern. And then before we get to this piece about did you feel the data was representative, the students were given the one-click theme report to start. And so they started to go through the different drivers of that. So the academic outcomes, the social emotional, the student drivers. And they looked at the one-click theme reports, they discussed with each other, they discussed with the facilitator, they asked a lot of questions, and then they went through a little bit of a hypothesis on each one. So they were saying, why are we seeing this result? And I'm just going to pick one that really resonated for me in the 5 high schools that I participated in this with. There was one of our high schools that is actually a 7 to 12 school, very small, declining population, very close to another Parkland school division. So it was very interesting that they were really concerned about the bullying that was reported, and they looked deeply, by the grade 12s. And so that was one that really jumped up, and it's not an academic outcome, but it was one that came out through this process. And the students said at the tables, and you'll see how each table had a voice in the room and how each student also had a voice. They said, you know what's really interesting? And we, by the way, the table facilitators all were first name basis. So in my former high school, I didn't table facilitate because they know me as Mrs. Aschenmeier, and they're going to kind of filter what they're going to tell me. So I made sure not to be at any of those tables at that school. But at Grand Trunk, where they didn't know me and didn't know many of their table facilitators, we went by our first names. And I'll tell you that built a really great relationship throughout the day. So when we asked them, why are you guys seeing this result? It became very clear that the grade 12 group had agreed before they did the Our School survey that they were going to choose that they are being bullied regularly, all the time. And I said, why would you guys do, why? I had grade 12s at the table. Why would you do that? Well, we thought it was kind of funny, and especially the boys thought it was funny because we're a pretty confident group and we're well connected and we don't really pick on each other, but we thought it would be funny. And I said, well, are you sure, though, that the voice in there is really all of you being funny? Yeah, we're pretty confident. And I said, okay, but what about, and this is where we went into the measures, and I reminded them, here are the questions that are asked of you on this survey. And that was very powerful because we're not just talking about bullying, we're talking about very specific questions that they were asked. And then one of the girls at the table said, maybe you're right. Maybe I need to think of this differently. How many kids said that they felt that way because things were happening in social media that I'm not even aware of? And I said, well, that's maybe something you guys want to dig deeper into. And so what they would do when they went through this is they would say why they're seeing a result on one of the outcomes, so the academic, social, emotional. Then they would say, what are all the actions that you guys could do, that you can support as students? Not what the district can do to you. What can you do in your school to maybe support for improvement in these areas that are going to make things better in terms of your achievement and wanting to be at school, etc. So then the brainstorm happened, and we listed everything the kids said. And then we had a discussion at the table and said, okay, and we reread everything that they had listed, so as table facilitators. Then we said, okay, if you had to pick the greatest one called your game changer, what is the one that you would want to put forth and target for your school? So then the Chromebooks go around the table. Love the Chromebooks, by the way. Chromebooks go around the table. They each had their own individual say. So it didn't even have to be a table of agreement on the game changers. And I think that's important. Student voice as a group is really important, but student voice individually, especially for those kids that aren't the verbal people. They're the ones that are more our wallflowers, that are quiet, reflective, have great ideas, but they're not the verbal speaking ones. It's a way for their voice to be heard. So they would go through, each student would then be able to vote on the game changer. Then what we would do before the end of the day, each time we did one of the social emotional outcomes, the academic outcomes, we would show the entire room their game changers. So of course using Google Forms, it does it very quickly, it populates it, we could show it. So we showed our game changers up there, they voted on this, the room, their school, determined that this would be the one game changer. Then at the very end of the day, we also wanted more of their voice and feedback. So we did an end of day survey, and then we did a results sharing for the whole day. So we went through things like, what's your favorite idea from today? So although they have voted on individual game changers for each of the outcomes, at the end of the day, we asked them to really choose one thing that was their favorite idea or favorite game changer for the day. And then we also went through and we asked them a little bit more about, we need your feedback on today. If we could do something different, what would you have us do? What did you like about the day? Did you feel your voice was heard? Were you able to share your voice in a variety of different ways? So that was also a part of the survey, was that feedback. Now that feedback's important, and every time we did a symposium, mini one at each of the high schools, the table facilitators, the team would meet, we would look at the student feedback, and we made changes for the next mini symposium. So we were taking that formative feedback to make a really great change for the next mini symposium. So because we did 5, the first one was my old high school, and they're always very good at being experimental and open to things, and we learned a lot from what the students said. So the second mini symposium improved because our facilitators got better at things. We read the feedback from our students and made some changes. They said it's too quick. We want to spend more time on the social emotional outcomes. So we used their feedback to each time tweak our mini symposiums. So the final favorite thing from the day, their final game changer, what happened in the mini symposiums and in the end of that previous survey, maybe I'll just, no, right here as well, we asked students if they would want to go to the district symposium. So we asked students who were interested in going, put your name down, we will, you know, have a conversation, we'll get you the permission form so you can come. So what happened then is we had between 5 and 8 mini symposium leaders from each school come to our district symposium. So now we have all 5 of our high schools with each of their game changers. So we're talking about 5 things that they want to target in their schools. And they met, and we just did this last Thursday. So Karen, who spoke at the beginning, she was a part of our district symposium. And I don't want to spend too much on the design challenge itself, but I do want to share a little bit about what occurred at the big symposium. So these 5 or more students from each of the high schools came to the room. We, of course, built in some energizers. It was a great way for schools to understand different contexts. Grand Yellowhead has very, very different schools. We have schools all the way from Evansburg to Grand Cache and Jasper. Our Edson schools are a very unique context from our Grand Cache schools. So the fact that these kids could share their game changers with each other and talk about their data was really valuable for them too. And sometimes they found things that were very similar. So what we began to do was a design challenge, and this was really to help them to process and launch their solutions for this upcoming school year. So in the launching of their solutions, they were able to design a prototype. So the 5, and I'm just going to use the number 5 because that was sort of the typical number of students from each school. 5 students representing their school, and remember there were 25 to 30 at the mini symposium. 5 of them took the number 1 game changer that they had decided in their high school site to this district one. At the district one, they designed a prototype. The purpose of the prototype is to now go back, which they are going to do in May and June, go back to their own high school and say, we decided as a team that this was our game changer for our school. We have done some research. So through the design challenge, they were able to ideate. They were able to speak to some, look on the internet, speak to the experts in the room at the district symposium. We had an ed technology teacher there. We had our family school liaisons. We had people like myself involved in assessment. We had people involved in health and wellness in the room. And so they were able to ask questions. One of the schools wanted to talk a lot about flexible time in their day. So their prototype actually became, how could we change our school to allow for some flexible learning time? And so what will happen is their game changer prototype will now go back to their school in May, by the end of May, beginning of June, and they will then share, which principals will be invited to be a part of, they will sell their prototype to the other 25 students. And then they can go through continue the design process where maybe they have to ideate, maybe they have to throw this out. Maybe the principal says, listen, you know what, we can't start school at 6:30 a.m. if this was their prototype, which we know high school it wouldn't be. 6:30 a.m., we can't do that because we have too many kids who ride buses. So they would be able to tweak and work with the school staff, the principal, to actually launch their solution in their schools. And that's why we really see it as that hand-in-hand collaboration, that connection. Now, were there prototypes? There were prototypes that, knowing some of our site principals, the way the students had initially planned it, maybe isn't going to happen easily in their school. But it's important for the kids, and if the kids can be a part of that design process where they can listen to the input from the teachers, the staff, the principal, and the principal really hears what they want to happen and why, then they can tweak and they can actually be a part of making that change. One of the game changers, besides the flexible planning time and student learning time, one of the game changers was a positivity movement. So one of our high schools, it's a school that doesn't have a lot of outside windows, and they knew that they could not, as students, they're not going to be able to get windows put in their school, but they thought we need to do something to create some positivity. So they talked about a positivity movement. They also then, this school, when they came to our big district meeting, their prototype became a living art wall. So they now have an idea to have, and we do have a high school that does have a living wall. It's our new high school in Jasper. These students hadn't been to Jasper High School to see that living wall, and they thought if we have a living/art wall, then we are encouraging creativity in our schools. And so our ed technology teacher said, hey, let me connect you to this website. And she turns around her Chromebook to them and shows them that there are places where they can get vinyl and it can be done to be stuck on a wall so there's nothing permanent, and maybe it could change, because that was one of the things in their prototype. If we have an art wall, when we as grade 12s leave, then our art is there, but what about when new kids come to the school? How do they get to portray some of their positive thoughts and their creativity and their artwork? So they were kind of tweaking that, and they're really excited to go back to their principal to talk about what are the possibilities. Here's what we want to do. We need that input from the schools as well, and our students are going to work hand in hand with our principals to really launch those solutions and make a change. Now, as I said, this is a first-time process, so we will be evaluating, were they able to launch some version of their solution in their school? Did we support our principals enough in this process so that they're truly the ones running their school? I've been a principal. You know, the buck stops with me in terms of site management, but it also, we think, opens up principals to seeing that their students have good ideas. Just like the middle school principal, when we shared the staff data, that he left it wide open. He's a risk taker. He was willing to let his staff truly dig into that data and come back to the table at a PLC and say, look, these are the areas we're seeing that we need to target, and we have some ideas. So how collaborative, hand in hand, and how powerful that we have our school staffs, we have our principals, and we have them working hand in hand with their students to make a change. So this is an initial start with the high school. I can envision that maybe next year we do the similar thing. Maybe we go back to and doing it with our junior highs. Maybe we'll be able to do this type of process if it's successful and students are able to truly launch their solutions. Maybe we do it with all of our grade levels. Maybe we do it with Div 1, Div 2. Maybe we find a way to do that, because I think the possibilities are completely endless when we are not afraid of the data, when we truly engage our students in that data. I know it's incredibly powerful. In terms of sharing, and one piece that I did forget, and I'll just kind of go backwards here, at the mini symposiums, at the end of the day, we invited the principals into the room for our debrief. So after the students left, we met with our principals for a bit of a debrief, and we shared, you know, verbal things that were said, that were, you know, things that came up. We thought you should know this. We think you should know this about your students. All of the Google Forms, all of the data was shared with the principals at the very end of the symposium. But we thought it was important to connect personally with those principals, because the principals in the room here know you are busy people too, and sometimes it's easier to actually collaborate face-to-face than reading the black and white data. And so we did it when it was fresh, so we could share with principals that piece. The nice piece, the hand in hand, is now that the students are going to go back with their solution and what they want to try and tweak it with, you know, help from the school staff and certainly from the principal for that solution. So I have put up here my email. If there's any of the templates or any of the, you know, what we did with the Google Forms, if anybody is interested in that as a resource, feel free to email me. I would be happy to forward any templates. So from ones we did with our principals, with our guiding principles on it, and then any of, you know, the trend type data, what we looked at, what we shared with our board, to the Google Forms, and anything related to the symposiums, I'd be happy to forward them on to you if you email me.